This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody, and good to have more and more people coming in person. That's what we like to see. Good, and a special thanks to Sarah, who put together the lunch today when I did some shopping for us. So I think it's nice having bagels, creams, and lox every once in a while. Yeah, yeah, good Jewish food along with some matzah balls or gefilte fish. We're doing well. Good. Okay, so the Gemara in Gittin, the Talmud in Gittin, tells a story to which it attributes the Churban Beit HaMikdash. It attributes the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash to this event, to this story, and also points that accusing finger of guilt at one of the participants there, though surprisingly, it's not who we would have expected the finger to be pointed at. And we need to unpack this story to a certain degree. And we also need to just get a better understanding of why so much importance was attributed to this. The story is known as the story of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza. Okay? Two different people, very similar names, that is rife for confusion, and we'll see what happened. Let's go through the Gemara first, and by the number 1 there, where we have it, the arrow, Akamtza ubar Kamtza. We have it both in Hebrew and in English, so everyone should feel comfortable to follow as they are most comfortable following. Akamtza ubar Kamtza, as a result of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza, Charuv Yerushalayim, Jerusalem was destroyed. Meaning what? Dao Gaver the Rachme Kamtza. There was a person who had a very, very close relationship with Kamtza. Ubal Dibave, and he was at odds, an enemy with Bar Kamtza. Avad Sudata, he made a Suda, he made this wedding feast. Amalei Lashami, he told his attendants, Zil Aitili Kamtza, go and bring Kamtza. Go and invite Kamtza, make sure Kamtza comes to this Suda. Aza, he went, and mistakenly Aitile Bar Kamtza. He got confused, and instead of inviting and bringing along Kamtza, he invited and brought along Bar Kamtza. Ata, he came. Ashkechei Tahavi Yativ. The host, interestingly enough, the host goes unnamed throughout. Ashkechei, he found Tahavi Yativ. He comes at his meal, he's making his rounds by the tables there, and he comes to this table, and he sees Bar Kamtza, of all people, is there sitting at the wedding. You are an enemy of mine. What are you doing here? Kum, puk, get up and out. Amarle, Bar Kamtza said, Hoil va'atai shavkin. Since I've come, let me remain. How much are you paying the caterer per plate? I will reimburse you my plate cost. We go up to the top, off to the right now. Amar Leilo, the host said, absolutely not. Amar Le, Bar Kamtza said, I'll pay you half the catering bill for this entire wedding. Allow me to stay. Amar Le, lo. He said no. Amar Le, I'll pay the cost of the entire su'uda, the entire meal. Amar Le, lo. The host refused. No. Nakte biyadeh, took him by the hand. Okme stood him up. Afke, and sent him out. Amar, this Bar Kamtza said, Hoil v'havi yatvi rabbanan, v'lo machu bei. The rabbanan, the rabbis were sitting there, and they did not protest. They allowed this public humiliation of me to go on. Shma mina kaneichelahu. That means that they were happy with what happened. They were okay with what happened. Ezel echel behu kurtza be malka. I'm going to go and slander these people, the Jewish people, his own people, by the king. Azal, he went. Amalei lekeso, and he said to the Caesar, Mar du'b'cha Yudai, the Jews are rebelling against you. Amalei miye, Mar, who's to say? How will you substantiate that? Amalei shadalu korbana, send to them a sacrifice that they should offer that sacrifice on your behalf. Chazit, and let's see, imekarvin lei, if they're going to offer that sacrifice on your behalf. Azal. The Caesar said, that's a good idea. That's a good test. He went, Shadabiade Igla Tilta. He sent a third-born calf, a very, very prized, a very, very expensive calf. Bahadi de Kaate, as Bar Kamtza's bring this, Shadi be Muma beniv Svatayim. He very, very quietly, right? It wasn't clear what he was doing, right? But what did he do? He put a blemish on the nisatayim, on the lips. The others say, a different version of the story, the dukin sheba'ayin, in a part of the eye. Duchta didan havemuma ulididulav mumahu. A place where, and they're going to number 3 now, according to a Jewish law, that is considered to be a a blemish, a disqualification. But for Gentiles, that's nothing. Savur Rabbanon Likruve, Mishum Shalom Malchut. The Rabbanon thought, you know what we should do? We should bring the sacrifice because of Shalom Malchut, because we need to maintain working relationships with the government, with the Caesar. Amalu Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas spoke up and said, you can't do that. Yomru bale mumin craven legabi mizbeach. People will walk away with a misconception that one is allowed to offer blemished animals on the altar. Savar lemiktale. Okay, plan B. Let's kill this Bar Kamtza guy, Delo Leza Valema. And that way he won't be able to go back and report. Rabbi Zechariah spoke up again. Yomru, they'll say, Matil mum bekachim yareg. They'll walk away with a misconception that the punishment for one who blemishes kachim, sanctified animals, sacrifices, yehareg, is punishable by death. Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, An v'tanuto, we'll pause there for a second. So who would you say are the ones that brought about this tragedy? Who would you point the finger of guilt at?
Bar Kamtza.
Okay, Bar Kamtza, Bruce said, right? Bar Kamtza. Steve has it in for the rabbis. He wants to point to the rabbis all the time. Okay, but right, Bar Kamtza certainly is the one who reacted in an incredibly exaggerated way.
The
Right?
host.
No one likes to be humiliated. This was a tremendous humiliation, public humiliation, right? But to bring down the Jewish people, Bar Kamtza,
The host,
certainly.
Rabbi. The host.
Ah,
The host.
I heard a bas call coming from Leah. Yes, Leah said, the host who goes unnamed over here. Right? I mean, let's think for a moment. He and Bar Kamtza are these enemies. Bar Kamtza received an invitation from this enemy and probably thought to himself, wow, maybe we're going to make amends over here. Right? He probably struggled. Do I want to go? Do I want to be there? And he was willing to swallow it and say, you know what? He invited me. I'm going to go. And then to be met with this, that the host then, I mean, I've made a few weddings. That's a very tempting proposal to cover the cost of the whole Seudah. I'd like to invite Bar Kamtza, quite honestly, to all of my simchas. He's more than welcome to come to all of my simchas. Guests like that are hard to come by, right? So the host certainly, we would say, is certainly very, very guilty. Yes, Dove.
The agent started the problem.
I would disagree. Dove's making an interesting point. The agent is the one who messed things up, but in life we all mess things up, right? And then the question is, that's what you always say, how do we clean it up afterwards? That's what makes all the difference, right? Right? How do we clean it up afterwards makes all the difference. So the person, Kamtza and Bar Kamtza, he made an honest mistake, right? And I wouldn't point the finger at him. The Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, An vitanuto. Interesting term. We'll have to work on this. Right? The English says the scrupulousness. I don't like that translation. An vitanuto means the humility of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulus. Hechariva et beitenu. That is what destroyed our Beit HaMikdash, V'sarfa et Heichalenu, and caused the Heichal, the actual abode there, to be burnt, V'higlitanu me'artzenu, and exiled us, sent us out from our land. Rabbi Yochanan points the finger at Rabbi Zechariah. Okay? Now, Steve did too, right? And to a certain degree, we can understand where he was coming from, and we can understand the mistake that was made. Let's explore it a little further, but let's understand also this anvitanuto, right? Why are we describing this as his humility is what sunk the ship over here, right? His humility is what sunk the ship. Again, it's interesting to note that the host's name is not mentioned at all. Kamtza and Bar Kamtza are mentioned, right? Even though, what did Kamtza do wrong? He never got the invite. I once heard an interesting explanation. I'll tell you an incident that happened with me. A friend of mine from high school who I hadn't been in touch with it's been a long time since high school at this point in my life. I hadn't been in touch with for quite a long time. But I heard that very sadly that his wife passed away. So I made sure to go pay a shiva call. And he was very, very happy to see me. And we had a chance to catch up. And it was a very meaningful shiva call that I paid. About 3 or 4 years later, 3, 4, 5 years later, whatever it was, I heard that he was getting remarried. And I was thrilled. And the wedding was going to be about a 20-minute drive from where I was living at the time. I wasn't invited to the wedding, right? I didn't expect to be invited to the wedding. We weren't in close contact with one another. We were high school buddies. But the wedding was 20 minutes away. So I put on my suit, put on the tie, drove over there. And at the point of dancing, I went in, grabbed him by the hands, and we had a good dance in the middle, right? A good hug. I didn't sit down to the meal, right? But we had right? So there are those that say, I believe the Brisker Rav says, why didn't Kamtza come? Because you didn't get invited, you're going to stand on ceremony. This is Rachmaneh. This is a good friend of yours. Right? You're going to stand on ceremony. I didn't get the invitation. Maybe it got lost in the mail. Maybe it just got confused. Maybe it got confused, as in fact it did. So Kamtza is somewhat implicated in this, in that he didn't step forward on his own. The names, we'll come to this at the end. The names are very, very interesting. And the names might give us a little bit of an indication that it might not be so much the actual event, but the attitudes that were prevalent at the time that led to all of this. Let's take a look, if we can, right? I don't have this translated, but I'll read in Hebrew and translate as we go along, from Rav Nebenjal, the former chief rabbi of the Ir Atikah, the old city of Jerusalem. He writes, I'll read in Hebrew and translate. What was his calculation? He was a great Rav. He's mentioned in the Gemara. He's a great, great sage. What was his calculation? Oh, sorry. 1 second. Let me roll here for those who are over there. Okay. Yeah. What was his, and if I forget anybody online, please let me know. What was his cheshbon? What was his calculation? Did he not know that if you insult the Caesar, the Romans are coming after you? Right? This is pikuach nefesh. Right? It led to so much bloodshed, and it was very easily foreseeable that it would lead to this bloodshed. Right? Did he not know that pikuach nefesh is docha will override the prohibition of bringing a blemished animal on the altar? Right? Pikuach nefesh overrides Shabbos. Pikuach nefesh overrides just about everything except for the big three, right? Idolatry, adultery, murder. Hatshuvahi. Sha'amna. The answer is, he thought, yes, granted, mutar lavor alav. You're allowed to transgress a lav, a don't, a prohibition, because the pikuach nefesh to save lives. Afilu asar alavim, you could transgress 10 prohibitions. Afilu chalal Shabbat, you could break Shabbos. Yom Kippur, mutter, right? We feed people on Yom Kippur when it's an issue of pikuach nefesh. Aval akirat haTorah. But the uprooting of the Torah, lo nitchit, that is not overridden, mipnei, because of pikuach nefesh. Im yilmadu din lo nachon. If people will learn out an incorrect law, teitzei halacha l'dorot, that will become the halacha for all generations. Shebeit dino Rabbi Zechariah pasak, the Beit Din Rabbi Zechariah ruled, shebali mumin korban al mizbeach, that blemished animals can be brought on the altar. Zohi akirat haTorah. This is an uprooting of the Torah. Va'akirat Torah, and such an uprooting the Torah, eino nitchit, does not get overridden mipnei pikuach nefesh. Kach hizbin reinu harav agon Rav Chaim Shmulevitz etzvarato shori zechai ben avkolos. That was the explanation he's quoting from Rav Chaim Shmulevitz of the Sichos Musar, who was the Rav of the Mir, or the Mashkiach of the Mir Yeshiva, when it was in Shanghai, when it was in Mir in Russia, when it was in, no, I'm sorry, that's Rabbi Yerucham, when it was established in Yerushalayim. He goes further. Second paragraph. So what was his mistake? Rav Yochanan very, very seriously levels the charge against him. That seems to be a good calculation. Where was the error? The Gemara says it was his humility that caused the destruction of the house, of the Heichal, and Higlitanu, and exiled us from our land. Where was the mistake? Where was the error in this calculation? And now Rav Nebenjal writes, I understand. My thoughts are, Shata'ut the mistake is, Shechurban HaMikdash, the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, Upizur Yisroel Ben Amos, and our being scattered amongst the nation, Shenigram, which all came about Ketotzot as a result, Mehorato, from this ruling of Rabbi Zechai ben Akulus, Hu Akirata Torah Harbe Yoter Gdola Min Akirah Sher Rabbi Zechariah Kashizla. This is a greater uprooting of the Torah than that which the uprooting that he was concerned about. He was concerned, there'll be an uprooting of the Torah. There'll be a mistake in din, law for generations that people will say you could bring a blemished animal onto the altar, the resulting uprooting of the Torah was far more severe that resulted. Hooray! Aideshi Yisroel nafutzu, because we've been scattered. Ba'arba kanvot aris, to the four corners of the land. B'chacham echad loret chaveiro. One chacham, one sage does not see his friend. Harif, Rabbeinu Alfasi, Yoshe Besfard, he's sitting in Spain. Uposek Masha Posek, and he issues his rulings as he sees fit. Rashi, the great Rashi, Yoshe B'Tzarfat, where's he? In France. Posek Masha Posek, and he issues his rulings. Rambam, Maimonides, Yoshe V'Achakach Mitzrayim, he's in Egypt. Umasik Ma Sheposek, Uposek Ma Sheposek, and he rules his rulings. Naste Torah Kamea Torot. Our Torah has become like 100 Torahs. The Torah of the Rif, of the Rambam, Torah's Rabbeinu Asher, of the Rosh, of the Ramban, of the Rashba, B'chol Shar Chachmei Yisrael, Aleim Hashalom, and all the other Chachmei Yisrael, Ad Chachmei Doreinu Sheyichyu, until the Chacham of our generation, La'orech Yamin, that they should live for a good long life. Zohi Akirat HaTorah, Harbe Ter Gedolah. This was an akira, an uprooting of the Torah that was far greater than that which he was trying to prevent. Ta'uto, Shor Zechariah, the mistake, Haytaifo Shelo Sam Lev Lekach. He did not take to heart. She Mipsikato Yatsa Bitul Torah Gadol Od Yoter. That from his ruling came out an even greater Bitul Torah. Shekavan Shegol Yisrael Mekoman. One, we're sent into exile. The Gemara in Chagiga, the Talmud in Chagiga says, Ein lecha bitul Torah gadol mizeh. There is no greater bitul Torah than that. So that's how he explains the mistake that was made over here. You know, it's interesting. Rabbi Beryl Wine is a very famous historian, Rosh Yeshiva, rabbi of a shul. He writes that at the time that Rav Yosef Karo was writing his Shulchan Aruch in Tzfat, the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserles, was writing his Shulchan Aruch in Europe. And it's interesting, they both wrote on what's called the Tur Shulchan Aruch. The Tur, what it does, it doesn't rule this is what you should do, but it brings exactly what he's referring to. It brings the opinion of the Rambam, and the opinion of the Rif, and the opinion of the Rosh. He brings all, and the more, he brings all these different opinions. And then there was a need that someone needs to kind of bring it together. Kind of like people say to me, Rabbi, just tell me what I should do. Right? Don't tell me, just, what should I do? Right? We needed someone who just say, therefore, this is the path that we should take. We needed a Shulchan Aruch. A Shulchan, a table that would be Aruch, set for us. Set the table for us. And they were both doing exactly that. And they knew of each other. And Rabbi Yosef Karo finished first to market, as they say, and sent his manuscript over to the Ramah. He's reading the manuscript, and he has his own manuscript. And he's concerned, if I'm going to publish mine, then we're going to have two completely different Torahs in Israel. There's going to be Rav Yosef Karo's Torah for the Sephardic world. There's going to be the Ramah's Torah for the Ashkenazic world, and we will be split apart into two different nations with two different Torahs. So what did he do? He shelved his own work. He took Rav Yosef Karo's work and added notes. He added the Haggah, the gloss. He added notes. The Anu, B'nai Ashkenaz, and we, B'nai Ashkenaz, do it a little bit differently. We're during the 3 weeks now. The Shulchan Aruch only talks about Shavua Shechal Tisha B'Av Li'Yom B'Tocha. Only talks about the week of Tisha B'Av. The Sephardim don't have 9 days. They don't have 3 weeks. And he has his little gloss over there. When Rabbi Yosef speaks about not getting a haircut, and Anu B'nai Ashkenaz, we start when the 3 weeks begin, from Shavasa B'Tammuz. That's when we start. He had his gloss to try to minimize this issue that we have so many different opinions about. So that was the mistake of Rab Zechariah. That doesn't necessarily deal with the issue of Anvitanuto, of his humility. Mesilat Yesharim, the Ramchal. Mesilat Yesharim, the path of the just. This is probably the classic Musar Sefer, Musar book, which tells us how to go step by step by step. And he addresses this incident of the Gemara in Gittin. And let's hear how he brings it in. Both Hebrew and English, everyone should follow as they feel most comfortable. You cannot judge matters of Chasidut. This is not talking about Chasidim as opposed to non-Chasidim. This is talking about a person acting in an exalted, uplifted fashion. You can't view it superficially. Mar'ei and harishon at a first glance. Elet sarich la'ayin. You need to look into it. Ulihit bonein, and to contemplate. Ad heichan toldot hamase magiot. Not just one step ahead. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 steps ahead. Where is this going to lead? Ki lefamim hamase batzmo yireh tov. The action will appear to be good. Ulefisha toldot ra'ot. But because that which will result from it, the consequences, will be bad, you have to drop it. Were a person to go ahead and to do it, you're not a chassid, you are a chotei. You're not acting on a super high level, you are a simple sinner. We just had the Gemara, I was learning with someone else. Let's go with this. There's a halacha that a person, right? Should a person shuckle when he davens, right? What is the source? What is the root of shuckling, swaying when one davens? There's a pasuk which says, "Kol atzmosai tomarna Hashem michamacha." Every bone of my body says, "God, who's like you?" So we get ourselves into it. Right? There's another approach. You're standing before the king, the master of the universe. You stand there with perfect posture, with perfect deference. Which one is right? What do you say? Which one is right? Both. Meaning what? Both are right. So what should you do? Rabbi, so what should I do? Rabbis, what should you do? Well, you can't both shake and stand still.
Do what's appropriate at the time.
Do what's appropriate. I like that, Esther. Right? If your gentle sway is going to help your kavana, sway. If a more rigorous sway is going to get you going, go for it. If standing there in full deference is going to work for you, do that. And it probably will change every day, and even within any amidah, you might find that it will change. However, the Shulchan Aruch things when you're davening publicly amongst other people. You're at an airport, right? We did that once, Basil. You're at an airport, you're putting on your tefillin in the morning, right? I always try to arrange it that I could do it when I get where I get to, as opposed to, right? On the plane, it's almost impossible at this time, right? You can't even stand up, right? The way we're packed in these days, right? I always say that I got spoiled when the shul gave me that wonderful seat over there that I sit at. The problem is when I sit coach on the planes, it's a downgrade. I'm used to sitting first class over there, right? So if you are going to be davening publicly, right? So then you know what? Don't shake so wide, right? If it's going to cause people to hit olel to make a mockery, right? So you have to know. But my kavanah is that much better when I'm going at it. Very good. That's not the time and place for it. Yeah. All right, the Gemara that I mentioned, I was thinking a moment ago, Rabbi Akiva, when he would daven by himself, you'd find leave in one corner, he'd be in another corner of the room from all the bowing downs that he would do. When he davened b'tzibur, so as not to burden the congregation, it was much shorter, a much more simple, straightforward davening. You have to know not just what this is, but how is it going to look? Where is it going to go to? And he continues now, the second paragraph, both in Hebrew and English. V'abayit hasheni, the second temple, gam hu charav, it was destroyed. Ayidei chasidut kazeh, through such chasidus, such piety, asher lo nishkal b'mishkal tzedek, that was not weighed with the proper scale. The Maaseh, with that situation of Bar Kamtza, Amru, so Rabban Lekruve, Rabban said, let's offer it with a blemish. Or Zechariah said, no, people say Bali Mum and Craven. You can offer blemished act sacrifices. Sover Lemigdale, they wanted to kill him. He said, no, people will say. That was Chasidus. That was short-sighted Chasidus. It was very, very myopic view of something. You have to see the long game in what we do, in how we behave, how we react to situations, what we choose to do. We need to have that idea of Ezehu Chacham. We usually in the Mishnah Roa as right? Halomi Kol Adam. A Chacham is a person who learns from everyone. But another Mishnah Pirkei Avos says, Ezehu Chacham, who is a wise person? Haroa et hanolad, one who sees that which will be born from this. What is this going to lead to? Where is this heading? There's a fascinating tshuva from Rav Moshe Feinstein. Rav Moshe was the posek hador, certainly of the late 20th century. He handled so many questions in this ever-changing world, and he took it upon his very broad shoulders. Keep in mind, his very broad shoulders, I don't know if he was 5 feet tall. Actually, I just saw a story, such a beautiful story, that a mother had a child who was very, very small and went to their Italian pediatrician in order to get some advice about they have these different hormones that they give to help the boy get bigger, a little more buff. And he said to her, if you weren't Jewish, I would advise you to do it. And I'll explain. He said, the non-Jewish society looks at a person's build, stature, and that's how they get respect. The Jewish people look at who the person is. And this Italian doctor said, I've seen your greatest leader, Rabbi Feinstein, who stands all about 5 feet tall. And the respect that he has worldwide because of who he is, your people, you don't need to take the possible side effects of the hormones. Your people don't need it. Rav Moshe was a person who had the broad shoulders to handle these most difficult of questions. And over here, this is Yoredeya, and this was an Aguna Shaila that came before him. Aguna is a situation where we don't know what the status is of the husband, and that leaves the wife in a terrible predicament because she can't move ahead with her life and get married because maybe her husband's alive and she's a married woman. And well, we have many, many stories that came up, after the World Trade Center, and many shilas that came up in Israel with wars, that Rabbi Vadi Yosef and the poskim here went to tremendous length to rule to find a ruling that the women will be allowed to move ahead. Actually, there's a situation. Rabbi Vadi Yosef Zatzal was he needed heart surgery. He was having serious problems with his heart. He went to the hospital. They said, you need to have surgery right away. He said, we'll schedule in 4 hours. They said, he really shouldn't wait. He said, we'll schedule in 4 hours. He went home. Why? He was in the middle of working on a teshuva, on a responsa, to free up a woman who had been in Aguna. And he was afraid that he might die on the table and this woman will not be released if he doesn't finish his teshuva. And therefore he had to go home. That took priority over his own surgery. So someone took Rav Moshe to task a little bit. Umasha Kassid, again, I apologize, there's no English for this, but I will do the translation. Umasha Katav Yididi. And that what my dear one, Rav Moshe writes to whoever's writing to him, wrote, Eich Rishamanu Lismoch Al Chidushim. How can we rely on these new approaches, Ka'elu, like these Shebiarti Lamasa, that I explained, Lamasa, to, it's not just, we're discussing it in the yeshiva, and this is a good idea, this is a nice approach, but it's Lamasa, based on this understanding, yes, she can go get married. Ubeprachu neged Eza Achronim. And certainly when it goes against the approach of others who preceded me. Hinani Omer, I say as follows. Has the Torah reached its end? Is there no further understandings and depths and views that we're going to find in our Torah? Shenifsok, that we have to rule rak mashinitz b'sfarim, that we can only rule based on that which our earlier Rabbanim wrote? And when questions come up that are not found in their books, lo nachriotam, we should not reach our conclusion. Even when we have the ability, the knowledge, and the understanding to reach a conclusion. Vadai, certainly lanias daiti, according to, in my humble opinion, asur lo markain bevadai. Asur lo markain. It's prohibited to take such an approach. The vadai od yagdil Torah. The Torah will wax greater and greater, even in our time. And everyone who has and there's obligation on anyone that a din comes to him, that a case comes to him, according to what he can. If a person has the ability to look into Shas, the Gemara, the Talmud, Poskim, and all of the halacha svarim, with a good understanding, uvarayot nechonot, and good proofs, afshu din chadash, even though it might be a new approach, shelo dibru odoto basrim, which was not discussed in the earlier svarim. Ach ein liot gas b'hora, but one should not become haughty in his rulings. But tzarech limnoa k'she'efshar, and you'd want to hold back when you can. But when there's a need, certainly b'makom igun, when we're talking about a case of an aguna, when we're talking about a case of an aguna k'uv the zoo, like this case that he's dealing with over there, we are obligated to teach and to rule imrak niralanu latir. If we see an angle to say it's permitted, that's what we have to do. And we cannot be from those who are too humble. Ulagain bat Yisroel, and to cause a Jewish woman to become an aguna, or to cause that isurim will come about, right? Prohibitions will come about, right? I'm not sure if he means in other cases or in this case of an aguna, that if there will not be a permissible way for her, so then there's a serious concern that it'll be done in a non-permissible way. Oh, afrak lapsin mami Yisroel, even if it's just a case of a monetary loss, we have to step up. V'ayin begitin daf nun vav. Look to our Gemara of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza. Right? That his humility caused the house to be destroyed. Shekasha. It's hard to understand. Lama Amar Anvitanuto. Why do we speak about his humility? What does this have to do with humility? And see the Maritz Chias over there, his explanation on the Gemara. And he explains over there that the Anivus was, look, this calls for a real judgment call, that we're going against the halacha because of a concern of what will be, what's called a hora'as sha'ah. This is, I'm not making a ruling, but I have to go against the halacha. Right, we have an idea. Eight la'asos la'Hashem heiferu Toratecha. The Haftorah for Pinchas. We're not going to read it this week because we're reading the one for the 3 weeks, but tells about the showdown of Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, Nevi Habal. You weren't allowed to set up an altar outside of the Beit HaMikdash. Why is Eliyahu setting up an altar? Well, we needed an altar at this time. We needed that in order to show the people the fire would come down to Hashem's altar, not to the altar of the prophet Baal. There are times that you need to go against the Torah in order to uphold the Torah. This was one of those situations. But if a person becomes too meek, too humble, who am I? Who am I? Who are you, Rabbi Zechariah? You are the Av Beit Din. That's who you are. And that's who has to make the decision. As the famous teaching, Yiftach b'doro k'Shmuel b'doro. Shmuel Hanavi was a great, great, great judge. Yiftach was far less, but he in his generation is like Shmuel in his generation. That approach is, even though he's not like Shmuel, but for that generation, he's the one. And if Rabbi Zechariah was the one, he needed to not step back and say, who am I? But to take the mantle onto his shoulders. I heard a beautiful thing. When the Gemara has a non-resolved question, what does the Gemara say? Teku. What does teku mean?
Send it off.
Well, Tishbi Yashuv Kushiyotz. Who's going to answer it? We have to wait for Eliyahu Hanavi.
Yeah.
I was joking, saying maybe that's why he's taking so long to come. He sees what's on the docket over there, and it's a little bit intimidating. But I have another question. Why wait for Eliyahu? How about Moshe? Why Eliyahu? How about Moshe? I heard a beautiful explanation. Eliyahu knows us. He comes to every bris. He's at our Pesach Seder. Eliyahu knows us. Eliyahu knows the generation. Who can rule for us? Someone who knows us. Eliyahu is the one who could offer the ruling. An alternate explanation, Yiftach Gedoro is, right, it's not saying Yiftach is, well, he's not as good as Shmuel, but if that's what you got, that's what you've got. No, Yiftach Gedoro, he is the one. He's better than Shmuel. For Yiftach's generation, Yiftach is better than Shmuel. You have to step up. That's what the Maritz Chias says over there in the Gemara Gittin. You've got to step up. And you can't say, who am I to take this on my shoulders? Rav Moshe continues, the Kamtza mamash kiyotze. The situation that you're presenting to me that I'm in is exactly the same thing. I've got to step up. I've got the knowledge. I've got the ability. And therefore, I, in this generation, I've got to take this responsibility on my very, very, very broad shoulders and issue rulings to prevent situations of aguna, to prevent situations of isurin, of other prohibitions taking place. Umuchrachin anu laharot, gam lamase. And we have to rule gam lamase, not just in an intellectual discussion during a Gemara class, but therefore, this is the ruling for this person. When we have proofs, ubahavana yisharan, with a good understanding, ubeprat, and certainly b'malkim igu kazeh, ulhatzim machshol kazeh. Certainly, it's the case of an aguna to save from any such stumbling. That was the anivus. And coming back to what Steve had said before, so we're pointing the finger at Rabbi Zechariah, right? Even though the host was horrific, and Bar Kamtza was horrific, but it could have been remedied. It could have been cleaned up. And for that, who do we have to look at? We need to look at our Torah leaders. And that was the role that Rav Zechariah could have played, should have played, did not play, and that is why we say that Rav Yochanan said that because of him, the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. Yes, Dov?
Look at the parsha we're in, Pinchas.
Good point. Excellent point, Dov. Right? Moshe was unsure what to do. Nis'almu mimenu halacha, the halacha, he lost the halacha, and Pinchas is the one who stepped up. Excellent, excellent parallel, Dov. Yes, right? When the time comes, you have to step up, and you can't say, right, who am I? The Gemara says, b'makom she'ein ish, sham tehei ish. In a situation where there is no man, where there's no one who's filling that role, sham tehei ish. There you step up. If there is an ish, then sit back. Don't feel it's always got to be you. But when the role needs to be filled, then you need to be ready to step up and do it. Just one last point that I wanted. Okay, the Medrash Eicha, the last source we have, has a slightly different version of this story and says that Rav Zechariah was there at the Suda and he could have. He had the ability to stand up to the host and say, this is not right, right? Step back. And he did not. According to that version, we hear a little bit easier how it was all leveled against him. But I saw an interesting point that was made. Kamtza. What is a kometz? Where do we have kometz, Kamtza? David?
The Kohen.
Yeah, the Kohen with the flour offering, a meal offering. He takes off a kometz. A kometz is a palmful. No thumb, no pinky. Takes off a kometz. A kometz is a small amount, right? Famously, when Mordechai came, when Haman came to Mordechai with the cloak of the king and all the crewmen there and the horse, right? He was giving a shear. What was he giving a shear? In Kamtza. And Haman said, your little kometz has overridden my 10,000 pieces of silver. Kometz is a small amount. When we say bar something, right, the son of, the daughter of, we talk about bat kol. Right? I mentioned before when Leah spoke, it sounded like a bat kol. Right? A bat kol is the daughter of a voice. It's not even a voice. It's an echo of a voice. So bar makes something. So kamtza is a small amount, and a bar kamtza is an even smaller amount than a small amount. Right? Because of kamtza and bar kamtza, because of pettiness, because of making a big deal out of something when we should let it go. Right? He should have let it go over there, right? But I think this is it's a wider lesson for us, right? We know the Gemara tells us that it was sinat chinam. It was what's translated as baseless hatred. I prefer to translate it as judgmentalism, right? Looking at everyone else and finding fault in everyone else instead of finding the positive in everyone else, right? That tsar ayin, that stingy eye, right? And not being willing to let things go. It's kamtza. It's a bar kamtza. Let's work together. Let's find our common ground. Let's find the positive. Let's build up that unity that we have over here. Right? The Kamtza Bar Kamtza attitude, right, led to the Churban, and also Rabbi Zechariah's attitude of, according to this Medrash Eicha, not getting involved when one should get involved, right? That he should have protested then, or according to the standard verses as we have in our Talmud, at a later point it could have been remedied. We have to be willing to have that, as Dov said, that strength of a Pinchas, that strength and clarity of a Pinchas, but also, we'll discuss this on Shabbos actually, also have the attitude of a Yehoshua, of Ish Asher Ruach Kol Ishbo, along those lines, right? To work with the others also. Okay, my friends.
Can I make a comment?
Please, Sean.
First of all, I love the Shia. Beautiful.
He had to say that. It's my
all
brother.
together. So I'm also connecting the dots according to something that I just learned, which is interesting. Because we know in general was sinat chinam, this hatred. It was not of them really integrating that v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, to love your fellows yourself, is the klal gadol for Torah. So a klal can either mean like a principle. It's usually translated as the central principle of the Torah, but klal also could mean the whole. That klal and prat, the whole. And I've always thought of this as being the central principle. And I just saw a beautiful, beautiful Torah. It said that if this is the klal, then all the pratim have to revolve around it. And what I took that to mean is, whoa, he's not saying it's just the principle. He's saying this is the entirety and everything else is the details. Right. What does that mean? It means that everything else in Torah has to be evaluated in terms of how it relates to v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. So here, what we see is that making that ruling that we couldn't bring the korban, we couldn't kill Bar Kamtza. He was getting stuck in the actual halacha without seeing how it related to v'ahavta l'recha kamocha.
Nice.
He wasn't seeing that. Yeah, so I'm going to stick to the halacha, but what's it going to do to all these people? So
Nice.
Can't see the
Yes, you
forest
go.
for the trees.
Yeah. Nice. Yes, Dove.
I would say one more thing too. When that situation came up, there was a lot of heavyweight rabbis there. He should have just said to his guests that he didn't invite, just sit down and that's it. Just sit down.
That's what the host should have done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, my friends, we'll call it over here. Those on the bench could band together and bench together. I didn't have any of the bread, so I'll be passing. You two, I know you didn't have any of the bread over there. Okay.
no, she's on the bench.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just 1 second. Okay. Oh, good. So we had Leah, Rosa, and Ken also came on. Good. Okay, everybody. Have a good Shabbos, everybody. Thanks for speaking up when you did, Leah.
Thank you so much. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.